Supreme Court just smashed the DOJ's case in emergency 8-1 ruling. A silent legal war just ended in a thunderous Supreme Court ruling. In an 8-1 decision, the justices handed down an emergency blow to the Department of Justice's challenge to Missouri's Second Amendment Preservation Act. But this wasn't just about Missouri. The ruling could reshape how states nationwide resist federal gun control and protect firearm owners from unconstitutional overreach. The federal government lost more than a case. It lost a strategy. In this video, we break down exactly what the court ruled, why it matters for every gun owner in America, and how this changes the future of 2A battles at the state level. Welcome to Firearms Law Advisor, not politics, not spin, just the truth behind the legal battles that shape your rights. Subscribe now to stay informed and empowered. Missouri's gun sovereignty law hits the national stage. In 2021, Missouri passed a bold new law called the Second Amendment Preservation Act, or SAPA. It was designed to prevent state and local officials from enforcing federal gun laws that violate the Constitution. Critics called it radical. Supporters called it essential. Now, thanks to the Supreme Court, it is center stage in one of the most important federalism battles in recent history. Key takeaways. SAPA forbids Missouri agencies from assisting in enforcing federal gun laws deemed unconstitutional. The law enables private citizens to sue agencies that violate the state's protections. Missouri's legislature claimed the federal government had no authority to commandeer state resources. The Biden DOJ filed suit, claiming SAPA violated the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution. This law sparked a legal fight that tested the boundaries between state sovereignty and federal enforcement, and it just made it to the highest court in the land. The DOJ's constitutional argument falls flat. The Department of Justice launched an aggressive legal attack against SAPA. Their claim? Missouri's law obstructed the federal government's ability to implement nationwide gun laws. But the Supreme Court wasn't convinced that the Constitution requires states to serve as federal enforcers. Key takeaways. The DOJ argued SAPA nullified federal law, violating constitutional supremacy. Missouri countered that SAPA merely exercised the state's right to refuse cooperation. The Eighth Circuit initially ruled against SAPA, siding with the DOJ's interpretation. The DOJ hoped the Supreme Court would kill SAPA and set a precedent against similar laws. Instead, the court issued an 8-1 ruling that surprised everyone, not by fully backing SAPA, but by gutting the DOJ's central argument and restoring balance to state authority. What the Supreme Court's 8-1 ruling actually means. On its surface, the decision appears technical, but the legal meaning is massive. The Supreme Court effectively said the DOJ's challenge lacked the kind of concrete harm required to justify federal intrusion into state policy. That nuance protects SAPA's core framework and blocks future overreach for now. Key takeaways. The court denied the DOJ's emergency application, saying there was no proven harm. Justices reaffirmed that states have the right to withhold cooperation in federal enforcement. The Anti-Commandeering Doctrine was upheld without the need for a full merits review. Only Justice Sotomayor dissented, warning that the law could lead to chaos in enforcement. This isn't just a win for Missouri, it's a roadmap for any state that wants to resist unconstitutional federal laws without inviting immediate federal retaliation. Anti-Commandeering, the doctrine that just won the day. Central to the court's logic is the Anti-Commandeering Doctrine. This legal principle says the federal government cannot force states to enforce federal laws, and it has deep roots in Supreme Court precedent. Without needing to re-argue the merits, the court leaned on this powerful doctrine to reject the DOJ's claims. Key takeaways. The doctrine was first confirmed in Prince v. United States, 1997. It says federal laws apply nationally, but state officials cannot be compelled to enforce them. Missouri used this doctrine as the foundation for SAPA's legal structure. The Supreme Court's refusal to dismantle SAPA reinforces this constitutional shield. This quiet doctrine has become the loudest tool in the state's legal arsenal against federal control of firearms, and it just survived the highest level of scrutiny. Why the DOJ's loss is bigger than it looks? This wasn't just a legal defeat, it was a strategic collapse for the Department of Justice. Their attempt to create a broad precedent against SAPA-style laws just backfired, and in doing so, they may have strengthened the legal ground for other states to follow Missouri's lead. Key takeaways. The court did not endorse SAPA outright, but it rejected the DOJ's framing of harm. Without a ruling on the law's substance, the federal government lost the ability to shut down copycats. Legal scholars now warn that SAPA-style bills may surge across conservative states. The DOJ must now reassess how to challenge these laws without triggering another SCOTUS rebuke. Missouri may have won the battle, but the real victory is how the court's reasoning invites more states to test and expand the limits of federal power. SAPA laws are spreading. Here are the next states in line. Missouri was the first to draw national fire, but it will not be the last. SAPA-style bills are already appearing in state legislatures across the country. Some have passed, others are waiting. The Supreme Court's ruling just gave them all a green light to proceed. This decision may have opened the floodgates for a Second Amendment pushback movement at the state level. Key takeaways. States like Texas, Arkansas, and Arizona have introduced similar firearm sovereignty laws. Florida, Oklahoma, and South Carolina lawmakers are drafting SAPA-modeled bills. Several state attorneys general have voiced support for Missouri's legal strategy. The ruling gave political cover for hesitant lawmakers to now act boldly. The ripple effect is undeniable. With federal power now on pause, more state governments are stepping up to protect gun rights in their own way with SAPA-style enforcement shields at the center. What this means for federal agencies on the ground: the Supreme Court's decision does not strike down any federal gun laws, but it makes one thing very clear. The federal government cannot use state and local officers as its foot soldiers. That leaves agencies like the ATF and FBI in a difficult position, especially in SAPA states. Key takeaways. Federal agents must now operate without local or state law enforcement assistance in SAPA states. This slows down investigations, raids, and firearm compliance efforts. Missouri officers face fines or lawsuits if they help federal agents enforce certain gun laws. The federal workload increases while local collaboration decreases. This breakdown in cooperation may stall some gun enforcement efforts altogether, especially in rural areas where federal staffing is already thin. The SAPA ruling just made every task harder for Washington. Can the federal government retaliate against SAPA states? After this ruling, many are asking what the Biden administration can do to push back. Can the DOJ punish states like Missouri? Can federal funds be withheld? Is there another lawsuit coming? The answer is complicated, and so is the risk. Key takeaways. The federal government can withhold certain discretionary funds, but risks new lawsuits. Congress could attempt to pass legislation countering SAPA, but political support is unlikely. The DOJ may pivot to civil enforcement actions against individuals rather than states. Any overreach by the feds now risks triggering constitutional pushback. The door is not completely shut for federal response, but it is now much narrower. Every move will be closely watched, and one wrong step could bring another Supreme Court battle. What gun owners in non-SAPA states should watch for? If you live in a state without SAPA protections, this ruling still matters. It signals that the Supreme Court supports state-level resistance to unconstitutional enforcement. That means voters, sheriffs, and lawmakers in your state now have a new argument and a new opportunity. This is how legal change spreads, not from the top down, but from courtrooms into communities. Key takeaways. Gun rights groups are using Missouri's win to campaign for SAPA laws in other states. Some county-level officials are declaring themselves Second Amendment sanctuaries. Sheriffs may refuse to enforce new federal restrictions even without a formal SAPA law. State elections may now center around two A enforcement pledges. This ruling gives political fuel to grassroots Second Amendment efforts in every state. And it raises the question, what happens if 10 or 20 states adopt similar laws? The battle is not over. What happens next in court? The Supreme Court's 8-1 ruling was powerful, but it was not the end of the legal road. The merits of SAPA have not been fully reviewed. That means future lawsuits could still land before the court, especially if enforcement cases arise. Missouri may have won this round, but the next phase could be even more important. Key takeaways. The ruling denied emergency relief but did not address whether SAPA is constitutional. Federal agencies may bring new challenges if enforcement is obstructed. If other states pass stronger SAPA laws, those could be challenged in new courts. Future litigation could ask the court to define the limits of anti-commandeering more precisely. We are entering a new chapter of Second Amendment litigation. This ruling drew the line. The next cases will determine how far that line can be pushed or protected. The Supreme Court just reset the gun rights battlefield. The 8-1 ruling in favor of Missouri was not just about SAPA. It was a statement that federal power has limits and that the Second Amendment still matters in modern America. This was not a full endorsement, but it was a clear rejection of federal overreach. The DOJ did not just lose a case, it lost its momentum. The real battle is only beginning. As states step forward and Washington recalibrates, every gun owner in America needs to be informed, prepared, and active. At Firearms Law Advisor, we are committed to exposing the truth behind the courtroom doors. No spin, no fear, just facts that protect your rights. So if you care about the Constitution and the future of gun laws in America, subscribe now, like this video, and share it with others. Because one ruling can change everything, and it just did.